Okay, that's me, Brian Postlethwaite from Telstra Health in Australia, and I've been involved for a little while. I'm a member of the FHIR Management Group, a co-chair at the Patient Administration Work Group, and a contributor to the .NET FHIR client, which is what the rest of the FHIR team works on. And so before I jump in and show a bit about our provider directory, I thought I'd give a bit of a primer on healthcare directories, because people are sort of familiar with it, but not really what's the scale of it, where do they fit in, and then talk about where is the FHIR inside our solution and what we're going to do with it next. So starting off, so here's our lovely little enterprise directory, so a provider directory, but we're not the only enterprise. So from one installation or one enterprise, there are other enterprises that are also running their own directories. And within those, so some organisations all fit within an enterprise and fit within that scale. And under each of those organisations, there's going to be lots and lots and lots of different applications which all have their own internal directories for their own purposes. So then if I look from that solution and then look up, so some applications are shared between organisations, and even some organisations themselves are part of different enterprises. So with those different branching logic. But then if I look in there, the further up direction from our enterprise, we see there's registration authorities, and to communicate between two enterprises, we want to share health information, so we need to have an endpoint directory which tells us how can I connect and find the shared care plans, where do I want to send those lab results to that external organisation. So that fits in there. Then we fit up to the larger level, so there's national directories which have a small amount of content, and then we can have regional directories. So things that Eric talked about at the start from the Sequoia project would sort of fit somewhere in that. Maybe it's an enterprise, maybe it's regional. Sorry, was that a question? Nearly? Okay. And also in that space, there's also certification authorities. My medical licence, so I'm certified to be a neurosurgeon, but I need to be registered in order to actually practice that. And so if I look at this, that is a whole bunch of different directories that are actual directory instances servicing different needs. I can't really jam all of that stuff into the one instance and say, there's my national single directory. They all have different information. If I look at the very top, I might have 1 million entries, but I've only got a very tiny amount of data about it. But then if I look right down at the application level, I've got really rich data about a small number of people. So it's not a one-size-fits-all problem. And so our enterprise provider directory fits into this sort of bucket here. So there's another comparison between provider directories and services directories. So sort of the provider directories are what we think about when we know who we're dealing with, a particular practitioner, and I want to go and look up who they are. Typical org structures look like that, but they're not really that strong for actually doing search and discovery and cases where we don't necessarily know who the practitioner or don't need to, such as in pharmacies or social services and a lot of that type of work. So yeah. Okay, so what makes a successful directory? It needs to be accurate, it needs to be current, it needs to have the appropriate breadth of content for the particular use case that my directory is servicing. It needs to be a relevant terminology. So if I'm targeting my directory for consumers, it needs to have a consumer-friendly terminology involved. Don't really want to have SNOMED there. If it's a clinical purpose, then SNOMED's the appropriate terminology to use. It needs to be accessible, so that's can the appropriate people get secure access into it and that level of detail. So the barriers to actually get at the data, and it needs to be petitioned. So that's really what, if I have to pass one message on, is this is how we can get and recognise what a successful directory is. So why do we have directories in the enterprise itself? So it's really around being an accessory to actually doing that care provision or doing other activities. No one has a directory because, I have a great directory and that's my whole purpose. It's really a bit of supporting infrastructure that enables a whole lot of other different things to occur. So I can share patient care, I can do referrals, I can do billing. All these other things are the real core of the health system, but I need to have an accurate directory to be able to do that efficiently. And if you look at the bottom there, human resources and payroll. Why do I have that there? I need to know, who am I paying? Am I paying them for the right reasons? Are they a qualified neurosurgeon? Do they have an up-to-date licence? And if I check that as part of that process, I'll know everything's all sweet. And inside my directory, I've got internal practitioners, I've got external practitioners. So that's a real, a big part of the system. So using the directories inside the enterprise is, I've got sort of typical problems. I'm not going to read through them all, but really with so many different directories inside so many different applications within the enterprise, I need to be able to coordinate that to be able to get that efficient. If I don't, I'm going to end up using incorrect data and then have to do all the run around and chase up or find data or re-enter it. And it just becomes very expensive. And if I look at practitioners, like that last option, practitioners and nurses, they have rotations every 6 to 12 months, and my set of interns will all come in. I know when they're going to happen. I can bring them in, but how do I get them out to all the appropriate systems so that they're ready on day one when they turn up? So what benefits do we get? We can reduce the overheads in administration. We can get quality and timeliness care because I don't have to go and chase up that detail. So, the Telstra Health Enterprise Directory. So it is that enterprise directory. So we have real-time feeds from parent and other directories. So in our installations in Australia, there's a national services directory, and so we take a real-time feed out of that and keep it up to date. Along with that particular data, we support adding extra local content into that store. So I can add, what are my internal identifiers, what are my organisational employee numbers, what are the personal contact details, the stuff that's not going to be in the national directory, and I can bring it in from regional stuff, and I can augment what else I need to have in for distribution down into my other organisational applications, so I can spread that through. So we have real-time outbound feeds through HL7v2. We have a FHIR REST API, which can provide that content out, and we have an event queue, which is passing the FHIR content around. So it wouldn't be a presentation here without some form of an architecture diagram. Here it is. So it's really the same information from the previous slide, but we can see our enterprise provider directory product in the middle with the data sources coming in and passing out to the downstream systems. And so why am I not seeing a UI here? We have a UI, it's a good UI, but the whole point of having a synchronisation and an integrated directory experience is to pass the information to the appropriate system. So I don't have to go and leave my clinical workflow, go to some other system, and then do rekeying. It just passes the information to the appropriate system to use at the appropriate time. We're a .NET on SQL Server, and we've got Solr indexing as well to enhance that search experience. We've used integration engines for getting into other systems, but we don't need them. So a little bit on capacity and data changes. So this is two different installations with the same parent directory at the top. And if you look, the numbers are not really that significant, but the actual spikes are different. So if I had the same parent directory feeding the same data into these same two systems, why do my spikes look different? Because the data going in is not just from the national directory, it's from within their own organisation. So, incoming data needs cleaning. Incoming data is dirty. And not like that. So each time there was one of those spikes, we were bringing on another internal system, And so it needed to be checked to say, are there new properties? Are there duplicates? We need to clean them. There needs to be moderation rules because we've got the same practitioner record across multiple systems, and we need to negotiate what data is what, do matching, and then clean things up. So what are the real benefits? So from an administration point of view, we reduce all that manual data administration, data entry. And we get the time to actually onboard a new provider reduced. I don't have to go and rekey everything. There'll be a percentage of information that'll be in some other information system, whether it's a national registry or a certification system, so I can really speed that up. And for the point of care, I can see that I can cut down the amount of time it takes during a patient admission because I know that the information on those practitioners is there. I don't have to go and chase up and go, what's that particular GP's address? How do I go and get to them so I can send the fax for the discharge summary after? Where's the lab? The lab's actually changed their address now, their fax numbers, and they're now doing electronic referrals. So all of that manual verification can get switched up and reduce the actual administration cost. And you really can see a reduction in the full-time employees that are actually managing content. And because the information is accurate, we won't have all of those, oh, what happened to the results? They went somewhere else, and the stuff that's going to be hard to measure. So, where's the FHIR? It's a full FHIR server implementation, just like we saw with the aid box and with the VONC and the facade. So we've got a full FHIR server underneath, and the Clio, the same sort of deal. So we've got a full-featured FHIR server underneath. It's an internal to our organisation FHIR server. It's publicly tested, got searching, chaining includes, the full CRUD, and one of the things I really enjoy is the full history support. So because it's got that detail under there, I don't need to worry about, oh, we need to add history now. It's just a part of the capacity. So the guys at Clio will be getting that history and access as they go. We got the full FHIR validation. We're a native DSTU2 because we've been around for a long time, and we now support an STU3 as a mirror, but I'll come back to that. XML, JSON, and HTML is a sort of an odd one to throw on there, but it's really a nice, convenient view for those administrators to just wander into the data without having to go, okay, pull out Fiddler, pull out whatever to try and get at it. And that's the organisation resource definition. Eric, thanks for throwing that on the screen earlier today. So this is the older version. Note, no endpoint at the bottom of this one. So this is the older version. So I only picked that up after I saw your slide this morning. So what FHIR resources are in there? It's a core data model inside. We're only including the provider directory related stuff. No patient data, so it reduces our HIPAA exposure. And we've got the full structure definitions to perform that validation in there. Questionnaires and questionnaire response. Why do I have questionnaires and questionnaire responses? So this is one of the UI screens from the application. So a lot of the user experience is actually done using questionnaires and mapping to and from the actual FHIR resources. So we can customise that user experience, add those local content, and keep things moving. So structure definitions, they're stored within. We've got simple capacity to view and do simple extending with the content that's there. But we can then dive into the full forge and edit straight on the server live. Validation, it's the full profile. We do extended validation with item types, extensions with the questionnaires, and custom validation, and it's all through the pure FHIR structure definitions. So how do we get our STU2 and 3 live at the same time? So we have the national directory, which feeds in through a proprietary API into our APD, which has been there for a year or two, can't remember. And so we feed that through, it gets converted, added extra content for the new information endpoints, and then populates that into an STU3 build and keeps everything live and gets used by other systems at the same time. Our National Health Services Directory is currently doing their STU3 build, and we're sort of working with them to make that a success as much as we can, and then in the future we'll be just running native off that when they're ready. So, what do we got coming forward? So, duplicates are a big thing in directories, and so we're heavily working on how do you manage those effectively when you discover them, how you respond to those, and how that affects downstream systems. We want to get true FHIR subscriptions in there. Ours is not quite. It's more like a SQL log than an audit event at the moment, or a subscription, but it's kind of cool. We want to support 2 and 3 and 4 at the same time, and we want bulk data import and export, because that's the way directories sort of work. People have large sets, they want to bulk import it in, and then run a synchronization feed on that. Endpoint management, we support it native in the server, but we don't have any UI capacity for it. That's coming. We've got a simple terminology service embedded. We're going to use an external terminology service to do that really high power stuff. And so we've worked through that. And the existing build uses an old implementation guide format, and so we're going to be switching that up to use the brand new NPM format. So you just say, okay, I want my new server, just like with the Vonk facade, you had the little yellow button to click it and download, get your app. So we've got an operation which does the same thing. So as you pointed at, I want this IG, please. It'll download it, install it, away you go. So thank you very much for all of that, if there was any questions. Otherwise, thanks for everything. Cool.